So before we start, just a quick show of hands. Who's here because they have documentation and they want to improve it? Okay, just a few people. Who's here because they have no documentation and yeah, okay. And who's here because their colleague, their consultant, their manager said, listen, you better go to this session? Okay. There's always one. Okay, great. Okay, excellent. Well, no matter why you're here, you're in safe hands. A little bit about us. This is Silvia. She's the head of systems and technology at Vice UK. So Silvia, you run a team, right? You run a team of very techie people. You're quite techie yourself. You are. So why is documentation important to you?
So I work for a charity, and although we are quite small, we have 4 admins. And if we all work together at the same time and we don't document, we're going to break each other's work. So documentation is very important to us in order to make sure that, first, we don't break anything, and second of all, because I want to make sure that we know in a year's time why we did something, how we did it, who did it, how it started. And so it's really crucial for us to save time and money. And Nathaniel, you are a consultant.
That's right.
And you run your own consultancy, 3 Strides Cloud Consulting. Why is documentation important to you?
Well, I think what's interesting is I do the same documentation that you guys do. I just come at it for a different reason, right? I do it because I need to hand over documentation. I want to make sure that the whole thing doesn't just fall apart when I leave, and that does happen. that you have consultants come in, they go, and it's like, what is this? But also as working with clients, and whether those are clients that are internal to your organization or they're paying for you to be there on an hourly basis. Communication is your key skill, and a key way of communicating is that written communication, is that documentation, and it really helps to bring everybody along the journey with you. Yeah, and that's sort of sales. We'll find I do the same documentation, we just do it for different reasons.
So I would like to set the expectation of what you're going to learn today, because I'm sure that we all think differently. You are working on orgs that are of different sizes. We've got different budgets. We've got different resources. So when Nathaniel and I had plenty of conversations about documentation, I did research. I remember the first time I realized, actually, we need documentation. I started researching and Googling and looked on Salesforce. And really, I struggled to find somebody that told me, actually, start this way, try these few things, and then see what happens. But at the end of this session, you may have different opinions, so share them with us. So this is how we think you should be doing documentation. And spoiler alert, we are going to start documenting Salesforce with Salesforce.
That's right. Look, there's lots of documentation that you can do. We're particularly thinking about your setup in your org. We're not going to be doing the architectural. I can see a couple of architects in the building. Sorry, we're not going to be talking about those artifacts. Maybe a little bit about business analysis. What we are going to be talking about is why you document. We kind of talked a little bit about that, but we'll go into a bit more depth. What you document. Then we'll look at how you document, and we'll finish up with who should do that documentation. Then we'll have some Q&A and stuff like that. Now, if you've not already, one of the fun things we'll do at the end is to share your horror stories. We've got a poll on the Hoover app, so you can go into Hoover, and if you have anything that you would like to share, you can pop that onto our poll to share your horror stories, and we'll talk about those at the end. We've already got a few.
Don't share too much.
So why do you do documentation?
Wasn't it?
Why do you do documentation? Well, as I said, I charge by the day, charge by the hour, and time is money, right? And sometimes you have clients that say, you're asking me to pay you to do some documentation. That's time, and that's money. So we're not going to pay for it. And then a year later, sometimes a little while later, they'll say, yeah, that was great, and we want to just add one feature. And I'll say, well, if there was documentation, I'd just be able to just go in and do it. But as there's not, I can't remember. I'm just going to have to do discovery with you, right? I'm going to have to go back and look at the stuff that we had. That's stuff that I've done myself, right? And I know the way that I work. God knows if somebody else has done the work. So, it's an investment that you have to make early, but no org stays still. And it's something that will save you money, save you time, help you be more agile in the long run. Also, I've got a certain reputation, I'd like to think, with my clients. And I do not want to be this guy. I don't want to be the ghost of the former admin that sat there while the new person is just looking at this. And my name's all over everything that I've ever put into a system. It will say Nathaniel Sombu. And I don't want someone thinking, what is this? Yeah, I don't want to be that guy, right? And neither do you, right? So you'll see how you can save lots of time and make life easier by doing some documentation in a very few simple ways.
So for us, I explained, all the things that Nathaniel has just said, but I'd like to give you an example of something that happened to us where documentation really was our lifeline. We do a piece of work every year, which is we are regulated by a competent authority and with tight deadlines, and the person in charge of it unfortunately was off sick during the peak time, and the organization went into panic mode. What are we going to do? Who does what? When are the deadlines? And as everybody was panicking, I was smiling away and said, I have got documentation. I know the process inside out. We've mapped the process. We've mapped all the customization done, by the way, done by a lovely admin sitting over there. And panic was over, and it was really easy to pick up that piece of work, and everybody was very grateful. And all of a sudden, all that time that we spent doing documentation actually said, oh, perhaps that was a good call to do documentation. Yeah, it was.
This is you.
When do you start doing documentation? So for me, it starts at the point when any of our users, our customers, because our end users, I work for an end user, so our end users are our customers. They come to us with a question, they raise a case, they raise a request and say, oh, I would like this new field, or this process is not working very well. Or, how about we add this feature? And for me, that is when I start documenting, because the first question that we ask is why. We want to understand the process. So for me, it starts at that moment. And when my team come together and we look at that request, obviously, sometimes we say, no, sorry, this is not going to happen. Remember, it's important to say no when something doesn't feel right for your org. But we come together and then decide, okay, if this is something we're going to do, is this something we can do in-house? Do we have the expertise? Or do we have to go and call a consultant like Nathaniel to do this piece of work? So if it's the latter, for the purpose of this talk, we're going to go with that scenario, then I'll gather all that documentation already and go to the consultant. However, Nathaniel, how many of your customers actually come to you and say, I've got a problem, I mapped all the process? No. Okay, so yeah. What's your side of the story?
It's a rare thing. It's great when people do, and it's fantastic, and it's good to see that you do it. And you know what? When people do it, and And sometimes you have to do it again because it's rubbish. But when people do it right,
don't look at me. Not our case.
Yeah. But when people do it right, it's a real time saver. It really helps you get off the ground running. It means much better accuracy with what you're doing. And you can say, oh, actually, yes, I know what you want. I know why you want it. I know how to do it. Yeah, this is my quote, and you're away. And it does make my life a lot easier. It makes the client's life a lot easier. But for me, one of the key pieces of documentation, and one of the things that you really need to make sure you do as a consultant before you start anything, is to say, this is what I'm going to do, right? You do it, have a statement of work and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is my deliverables, this is what you're going to get for your money. So understanding what you want and how you want it is important. And then sometimes if you don't, you just have to split it up. You say, okay, you know what, statement of work where we'll do discovery for ages, and then I'll tell you how, we'll do a separate statement for how long it's going to take me to actually do the thing, right? And that's always slightly uncomfortable. But you know what, you've just got to start right as early as possible, right? As a consultant, you kind of have to start before you get access to the org, before you turn on your computer. You've got to have a definition. And then that is what you use throughout your consultancy. It's what you use throughout your engagement. And then when people say, oh, but that's not what we wanted, which does occasionally happen, you kind of go, but it's what you said you wanted. Look, you signed up to this piece of this statement of work. And then it keeps the engagement on track.
And the statement of work is very important for us as well, because if it's the other way around, where you think, but actually, I really think that you said you would do this. Oh, no. Well, in the statement of work instead. So we cover each other's backs with the statement of work. So for us, it is a piece of documentation that is really important.
But if you take anything away from this slide, start straight away, and don't wait. Especially if you're an end user, don't wait for someone to pull the starting pistol and say you can go. Be like this guy at the end. Bring your own starting pistol and just get going. Start as early as possible.
So what should you document? For me, anything that when you look at that thing in Salesforce doesn't make sense just by looking at it. So if you can't work out what something is, then you have to document it. We have a field in our org that says renewal date. And I think about, is it the time the customer has renewed, or is it the time the customer needs to renew? There's a big difference there. So anything that doesn't make sense just by looking at it needs to be documented. And of course, everything for which you need to click a setup button needs to be documented.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And a lot of the stuff that I would do is kind of like a step-by-step, sort of this is what you need to do in order to expand this or to maintain it. And for me, when you're thinking about what you need to document, you need to think about how that documentation is going to be used, right? So if you're thinking, and I've had to do this myself, it's a big, complicated piece of thing. There's lots of architecture, lots of moving pieces, and you need to turn up with non-technical stakeholders and just go, as a reminder, this is what we're doing, right? Then your documentation needs to be a one-page slide that you can put up and say, this is our overall vision and architecture, right? If that's what it is, so it's like, what are we documenting? Who's consuming it? What are you using it for? A lot of documentation is for more, I would do, is for more technical folk, that and even, as I said, for myself later down the track. And, if you're going to do that, put yourself in the mind of someone that needs to do that task. What do they need to complete that task? And especially if it's for yourself, don't think of yourself on your best day. Don't say, oh yeah, on my best day, I can do this with no documentation. No. Think of yourself, imagine that you've been out to a conference, it's Friday, so, you think, I can go out and drink and dance and it's fine. And then Saturday morning you get pulled in and big emergency, can you come in and sort this out? You want documentation that will guide you through it without you having to think too hard, right? That is the level of documentation you need. And when you're looking at your documentation, think, does this take me there? Or as my former manager once told me about documentation, if you can't do it when you're drunk, you can't do it.
Let's get stuck in. So we want to give you some practical examples. We want you to be able to go back to your org and actually say, oh, I could do this and I could do that. So first thing I would like to start with is naming conventions. Naming conventions, descriptions, text components. Here I'm giving you an example of a dashboard where, of course, you have given a very easy naming convention. There's, of course, a description, and in the description you could possibly also reference external documentation where if you want to go deeper in understanding what's that for. But as you know, now we have the ability to add text and images to dashboards where you can even go even further and explain. I use now text components to explain what the dashboard's certain components are about, because they may be really easy for me to understand because I've done it. But then when I put myself in the shoes of a board member who's looking at this graph, it's like, can they understand actually what it is? And naming conventions. So this is, I love this slide. This is our org. I shouldn't say that. But you can see that, so this is a snapshot of some flows that we have in our org. And you can see that by the naming convention of the flow, you can straight away see is about opportunities, and it's about when an opportunity is closed won. This one is about when an opportunity is closed lost, opportunity name update, or pending member status. But even more than that, on the right-hand side, I can go deeper in that description and describe a bit further what the flow is about. And again, there you could possibly want to reference external documentation if it's not enough, for more technical documentation. And as you build your flow, you can add documentations in all the components. So naming conventions are crucial and descriptions are crucial. And you, Nathaniel, like a specific type of description.
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, look, the reason why we're saying use Salesforce to document Salesforce and put in descriptions, naming conventions and all that jazz is because when you are working in Salesforce, when someone comes to your Salesforce org, they're going to be looking at those flows, looking at those fields, looking at stuff, and go, yeah, I need to do things, right? And if it's there, there's no excuse for them to have not seen it, right? So this is why this is our starting point. What I like to do is build a report, and we'll kind of come on to how you build a report. So you can build a report of your fields, right? Field and object report. These are all this is my contact object. Actually, it's your contact object, isn't it? So this is a contact object. These are the labels. These are the API names in case you're handing this over to an integrator, as I've done in the past. Data types and a description. And you know what? If you have a flow, if you have an integration, if it's like, don't touch this because we've got this incredibly delicate API on the other end of this, add that into the description. Anybody who's working on stuff, we just go, we'll do, fancy word, we'll do some technical impact analysis, which for me is just like, let's just run the report, see what happens, right? And then you just look through the description to see for the fields and stuff that you're impacting, and you're done, right? And you know what your maintenance is? Your maintenance is when you do stuff on a field, you just update the description, right? So that's easy maintenance. So how do we create this? You create a report type, right? And the report type is, your primary object is not object, it's entity definitions. Don't ask me why. right? So an entity is your fields, is your objects, and then once you've created your primary object as entity definitions, we have field definitions, right? Objects, field, and that once you've deployed that report type, that's you can create a report that drags out those objects that you have descriptions on. It drags out the fields that you have descriptions on, and you can pull that out, give that to your third parties, give that to your other admins and your architects and your developers, and everybody then can be responsible for keeping that up to date. That's my favorite way of doing documentation, and we use Salesforce to document Salesforce in this way. Yeah.
So let's look at another example. Here I'm looking at the validation rule, and if you can see it from the back, who would like to tell me what this validation rule is doing?
Yeah.
So, there is no description. The error message is very clear for the user, but why on earth do I want them to fill the preferred email field? I don't understand. So this slide is the same, but with a description, and this is where the admin can understand, actually, the email field cannot be blank for syncing with Marketing Cloud account engagement. If the preferred email field is not blank, then the user needs to fill it in the relevant email. So this is because we have a very big third-party app that has got this custom fields, and there is some automation behind which we cannot touch. So we have to work around it. And so this is why we had to do this validation rule. And although it was quite clear for the user, it wasn't definitely clear for the admin. Now they know, oh, where is my Marketing Cloud admin? I need to go and ask them a bit more about that. Sorry. There you are.
So far we talked about having a description like on an object, or on a field, on a validation rule. One of the things that I like to do is also to have just little comments that tell me, what is this? Why is this line here, right? And if you've not done it already, if you put in a / you can type anything you like into a validation rule, into a formula, and you finish it off with / and you finish it off with // and then that is how you put in a comment, which is visible to someone looking at the validation rule, looking at the formula, but is not part of the formula, right? And in this case, we've got like something that we've put in there temporarily, yeah? The admin can say, oh yeah, that's why that's there. And when you remove that line out, take it out. But by the way, this makes sense if you write your formulas properly and put them into separate lines, right? But you guys all knew this already, right? Yeah, okay, grand.
So we would like to make you a little gift.
So Silvia and I are involved in a project called the Technical Collective. So I'm a technical coach for that. You're founder, and the idea of the Technical Collective is to bring charities and technical coaches and people that are involved in the community together with people starting out and volunteering with those charities, and bring them together so that somebody starting out can get some work experience, right? Part of that work experience is documenting their stuff. So far, we talked about using Salesforce to document Salesforce, but we can also, if that isn't enough, we can also have something. This is just a Google sheet, right? To say This is our project and this is what we're doing, stuff like that. This is a starting point, and this is what we've developed for Technical Collective for people just starting out and volunteering. And you can download it, and that's our gift.
Can
to
I do
you.
a little plug for, I'm doing a talk about volunteering partnerships at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so if you want to understand more, then come to that one. We have talked about tools that you can use within the org in order to document, but there are so many other tools that you can use to document. This is where it may get a little controversial because when I look at tools like Jira or PMT's Salesforce Lab project management tool or Trello, you say, but probably this is more for project management. Well, I really do think that documentation, there's a lot of good documentation in there. For example, we ran a project where in Jira we had all our whys and all the processes, so I just downloaded them at the end of the project because it was living with the consultancy, and if I had any questions, I would go back and look at that. And one of these guys, elements.cloud, are here today. They're outside. Is there somebody here from the room? There you are, Gianni. So I actually really like them. I'm not paid for that. But what elements.cloud does is that, first of all, they've developed the product quite a lot. And you can do process mapping, user story generation, now powered by AI, so it would read your script and create your process map and the related user stories. Pretty cool, I have to say. Of course, this is a tool, it depends on your budget, on the scale of your project, on the scale of your org, as we said, but it's just to give you another example of something that an external tool.
Yeah, and different orgs have different needs, right? You know, it does, as you said, it depends on how big you are, it depends on the complexity of your org. You know, you might say, I really need something that rips through stuff for me, and you might say, this is small, we just need to look at stuff that's in the org. It's completely up to you. We're not going to come around to you individually and consult and tell you what solution to go for. So we're now going to think about who should do your documentation. And as you can see, collaboration is a team sport. Everybody is involved and high-fiving each other. There's a little confession here. I kind of generated the images with AI, and AI does not know how people high-five each other.
But you got so excited about the AI.
But, you know, there we are. But, you know, everyone's involved, right? You'll notice that there is one person who is key, who is sat down actually doing the typing, yeah? So, you know, you want everyone involved, you want everyone's input, but, you know, just like having lots of chefs will spoil a broth, right? Don't worry, it's an English expression, you know, I've forgotten you're a foreigner. You know, but just like having too many cooks can spoil a meal, you know, having too many hands in your documentation can really spoil your documentation, and you get lots of different voices. So everybody contributes. There's one key person who is responsible for making sure that it's all there, and it might be that you have one person responsible for the whole org, or it might be you have one person responsible for that moment, right? So you're going, this project, this piece of development, this enhancement, you're the person, you're responsible for it because you're doing development, you're the person responsible for it because you're the BA, whatever it is, you know, but it's one person responsible for that part.
Great. So our job is done here. We've done our documentation, put it somewhere and forget all about it. No. So documentation is definitely not something that has a lifespan. What I'm meaning is that you know when you start it, but you're never going to end it. Your org will change, your requirements will change, people will come in and out. So it's a work in progress all the times. And I am slightly obsessed with documentation, and to the point that every quarter I meet with my team in the office for a whole day just to review the documentation. And the job is never done. I can't say that our documentation is the best documentation possible, but we really pay a lot of attention and we dedicate time, we block our time for documentation. And every time a piece of work is done in our weekly meeting, my first question is, where's the documentation? And if I can't find it, yeah, run away.
Yeah, but you're a mum, right? You do that
Yeah.
mum thing of kind of going,
So,
yeah, I'll look to see if there's any documentation there
in an hour.
In an hour.
Yes, I do that.
Yeah.
So, shall we do this now or at the end?
Let's do this now.
Okay.
Let's do this now.
Yeah.
So, you know what? We've talked about how to do it right. Let's look at what can go wrong. And we'll talk a little bit about how to avoid it.
Yeah.
So we have a poll that is up. I don't know. Well, we've had a few people.
Well, we asked a question. Let's see.
For your horror stories, let's have a look to see what horror stories we have.
I love one. There's one that I really love. So somebody has said that somebody was leaving the company and left a whole array of documents for documentations with all the headings, but nothing in them. And so it was all empty.
Yeah. It's almost like this is what you could have had.
Do you want to pick one?
I mean, a lot of you have said that their horror story was there was no documentation. Yeah, and that's fairly common. One of the things that I think we really need to touch on is one of your horror stories was like someone spent 2 weeks doing the documentation, and then they went on holiday, and no one could find it. Yeah, I mean, and it does depend on how you store stuff. But, if someone puts it on their personal drive, that's no good to anybody. It is, as you said, about sharing that knowledge across the team. Yeah, put it somewhere that everybody can find it so that, if you have a spreadsheet or something, it's there.
There's another one I love where it says that, sorry, I just lost it. Oh, yes, I love this one. So when I started documentation after everything finished and couldn't remember anything. So this is why my documentation starts, could we do that? Let me document it first. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, but if it goes somewhere, at least we're not forgetting.
Yeah.
Why?
This is more familiar to me than it would be to you, but someone said, the client talks in riddles, often forgets what they asked for, and then they get frustrated with us. What did I say about a statement of work, right? Statement of work is there to make it unambiguous, to say, okay, let's agree, let's sign this off. This is what you want, this is what you asked for, and then that is what all your meetings and updates after that are to work towards delivering on that statement of work, right? That's what it's for. I sympathize with the client talking in riddles, and you know what? You need to clear that out. And documentation is really about that communication tool, and communication is a two-way street. You need to kind of go, this is what I understood from what you said, and if they go, no, that's not what I meant, then you've got to have a conversation and go back.
Somebody else said, docs not kept up to date, diminishing value, so changes take ages and start from scratch every time. So this is why I then get everybody together for a day every quarter, because we know that whatever we wrote a month ago, perhaps now is already obsolete.
So last one before we go on to the thing, but just because it made me smile. So all documentation was in Comic Sans because the previous admin thought it looked pretty.
So let's end up in a more positive. So this is actually the poll we just did, but I love the picture. But let's end up on a more positive note. And we have asked some people in the community who have different roles, what is their top tips when it comes to documentation. I'm going to point right at you, and you know who you are. So let's start with, so Vanessa Grant, I don't expect you to read all this, but what I would like to show you is that they have very different approaches and they're all right. So Vanessa Grant, she's asleep right now because she's in the US. She's a BA, and she says, document, centralize, evangelize. You can put everything in a central location, but no one will know to look there unless you tell them. So go put everything all in one place. Vicky, Moritz and Ree, you are a consultant, and I love the fact that Vicky said, well, I'm not going to do it in the same way for everyone, sorry. So she's saying that she likes to create visual, auditory, read-write, and kinesthetic type of documentation. And I love that you have a very hands-on approach when it comes to documentation, how-to videos, but also chance to practice in a sandbox. And then Tazela Trooper, she is a developer. She's one of the co-leaders of the developer user group here in London. And she's basically saying, it's never too late to start. Just start. If you haven't started, just do something. And be kind to your future self when you will have no recollection of what you've done. And I love the fact that she says, actually, don't worry about writing too much, because now we have AI that can summarize everything for us. So better to have a lot, and AI can pick out the best bits than not having anything. And then Sam Wadwani, sitting here, CTA, and he, I love that obviously he has another different approach, again, completely different from Tazela. He's basically saying, concise, to the point, just enough information, don't blur too much. They're all right. They're absolutely all right. But so this proves the point that we are not going to do documentation all in the same way. But please do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't stress. Don't stress that you're getting it wrong, because there's different ways of doing it. And it's what's right for you and your team. So we're going to conclude by saying, you know what? You can unlock success, right? You can. We've kind of talked a little bit about, you know, how having the right documentation in place when you need it, you know, when someone turns up and says, we don't know what to do, you just go, here, I've got it, right? That it's a real key to unlock success. You just got to get on with it. Yeah.
And with that, we would like to thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Then we have a minute for questions.
But people have asked questions in the...
But yeah, you know, do ask us questions on the Hoover app, and we'll get around to you know, doing that on the app. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.